Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Daniel Spencer, and welcome to Agile Outcomes. Today, we have a special guest, John Eisenschmidt. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Daniel, thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself and have this conversation. Without reading everybody my LinkedIn bio, I would just share that I have a technology background and a project management background. I coached my first Scrum team starting back in 2008 and a government client. I also started my own course of leadership development around 2005, and that led me to get my first executive coaching, leadership coaching certification in 2010. I got ICF certified later and became an ICF mentor coach later. And those all really blend. I feel like I bring those perspectives together. I blend those in my Agile coaching. So along the way, I've collected some letters and some certifications from IC Agile and ORSC and training from back of the room and Lego Serious Play. And I'm also a little odd among Agile coaches that I work a lot with tools like Jira and Confluence. I work a lot with distributed teams and work management. And then, I will probably talk a little bit more about this, but I don't usually name who my current clients are while I'm working with them because we're usually under NDA. But in the background, some names you might know, like I've coached teams at American Express, Sony, FICO, Change Healthcare, Nant Health, which we helped them get to a place where they got IPO'd. Gazelle. So different industries, right? Governments, nonprofit, public and private companies, and several of them very highly regulated in different industries. So again, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here and chat about what's going on in the world of Agile.
Wow, fantastic intro, John. In fact, we just bumped into each other, I think, a couple months ago at the Agile Coaching Exchange. You didn't mention that part, but this is another one of the things that's keeping John busy. And I was really thrilled to be part of it because you were explaining, I think, the business of Agile coaching, you and Alicia McLean, and it was really amazing. You guys did a fantastic job. So this is just one of the many things that you're doing, outside of the work hours, right? To kind of really help the community, the whole Agile kind of community at large. So it's been helpful for me. I was wondering if we could get into sort of the state of union for Agile coaching. It's kind of been a while since we've looked at how things are going in broad terms. So how would you characterize the state of Agile coaching today?
There, yeah. So I feel like set a context here, right? So my work in this world really goes back to 2008. There's some people that have been around a lot longer, and there have been several pivot points, but obviously the pandemic is a mile marker for all of us too. So with all that said, as the demand for Agile coaching has grown, and one of our colleagues likes to share on LinkedIn terrible job descriptions for Agile coaches that seem to include everything but Agile coaching. We've gotten better about we've both gotten better about what we think that role and expectation is when a company brings them in, and there's still a lot of confusion. But I still see a lot of inexperienced coaches, people that have, may have been a really good scrum master, a really good team coach in one organization, and then they transition to independent or they go into another company as an employee where it's a different industry and they don't have a consulting background. They haven't seen it done different ways at different places, and they have a lot of trouble taking the application of the concepts in one place and applying them in a different place.
Right.
And so like my bottom line on this, and I'm scared to say this on a recording because other Agile coaches are going to hear this, and I'll duck for the tomatoes, but I just so much Agile coaching that's going on out there feels like process consulting to me. It feels like I'm the expert on framework and you're not getting it because I've taught it to you 3 times and you're not taking it in and embodying it.
Mhm.
And so much of what we do, I feel like when we're successful, is really just meeting the clients where they're at and helping them adapt the mindset and the practices to the environment they're in and how they get the most value out of that in their business. So I think a lot of people have had a lot of training. I think we've got a lot of more people in this industry. I think the organizations out there like the Agile Coaching Exchange, thank you, but also the Scrum Alliance and IC Agile. There's a lot of organizations out there trying to elevate the education and the craft of the people doing the work. But what I keep seeing or keep getting called into engagements where there are inexperienced coaches or they're just trying to treat it like process consulting, and they don't really have a set of coaching competencies behind them to be able to really meet the client where they're at and help them get where they're trying to go.
Okay,
What about
so
you? What are you seeing?
excellent point. And I think I can tie in with that. If you don't mind, I'm going to bring that up. The
Please.
Agile coaching competency matrix. Let's see if this works. Are you seeing
Who
my
else?
screen?
Here it comes. Who wants to look at us when they can look at the X-Wing diagram? This is much more interesting.
Yeah, so you talked about process coaching. So over here on the right side, we see process, right? So professional coaching, mostly, I think that's what I think of with process coaching, but also has facilitating. I agree. Part of it might be, if you looked at the social media, particularly like LinkedIn, you see all these postings on, hey, look how much you make with this certification, right? So they're almost linking coaching with certs, which usually backs a certain framework, right? So it ultimately can be interpreted as process coaching, I think.
What I love about this, so the old joke from statistics, right? All models are wrong, some models are useful. This one I find tremendously useful. When I first saw this in the Coaching Agile Teams training in 2015, it gave me language for something I didn't have before, which is a lot of what I think of as bad Agile coaching is it's the top wedge and the first one to the left. I'm the expert. Let me teach you. You're not getting it. Let me teach you again. You're not getting it. Let me teach you some more.
Right.
And just thinking that like one didactic of broadcasting of things that are, whether or not they're in a PowerPoint, but could be in a PowerPoint, is the way to meet people where they're at. And I just think it's essential to have these other skill sets where either you have expertise on the left or you have no expertise on the right, but you can hold that space or help people have a change conversation or help facilitate them through it. It is just so essential to help people understand why we're doing this and how it can benefit them and what their entry point is into it. This model, absolutely, everybody can self-assess and say, there's probably things I could use more of. What are those? And put those on your own development plan. But also it's adapting to the reality of, several of my clients don't have physical offices anymore. And so if we're in a more virtual world, what tools do you need? What skills do you need? And that's generally falls in that facilitation wedge, but it's a reality of being able to have the closest thing we can to face-to-face in-person communication in a setting like this is essential. And how do you do that?
Excellent segue. So I took off the sharing, but I thought we could continue with that. So what would be the request from coaches in the virtual world, or maybe kind of the upskilling call out there? It's like, okay, guys, might have gotten by fairly well because we're all in the same room, but now this is like things have changed. Like it's a different paradigm. So what would you be asking of the coaches now?
This is a wonderful question, and I have answers, but I'm also curious what your thoughts are on this. So I'll and maybe you'll share them, but I'll go first and say it's definitely being effective in that virtual environment. So it's definitely an ask of the coaches, but what I as I've retooled for this, and I'm not pretending I'm an expert, what I've spent a lot of time coaching scrum masters and team facilitators on are things like how general things we think about. But so the best scrum master that I ever worked with, every meeting invite, every event had a very clear the things we used to teach in the project management world when I was a PMP and have kind of lost. Like, the purpose of this meeting is the attendees are in the daily stand-up, these are the questions that you're going to answer, this is the expected outcomes. But even more so in a virtual setting than in person, if I take Scrum as the example, the events blur together. Like, am I in refinement, or am I in backlog planning, or am I in sprint? Like what event am I in? Like, I'm in the daily stand-up, but I'm talking about backlog refinement and maybe doing a little bit of sprint planning. But we haven't gotten to the outcome of what this event was. And so just making sure that they're setting up the virtual environment, that they're not the only one who controls it. So if they're not there, other people can take over it. What does that mean, right? It's my Zoom and my Zoom login, and you can't do it. But that people have a clear understanding of when they show up, what they're expected to do, how they're going to engage. And this, again, going back to this amazing, probably the best Scrum Master I ever worked with, he had a script for every event, and he would introduce it like it was the very first one. Like, my name is John
Mm,
Eisenschmidt, and as a reminder, I'm John Eisenschmidt, and this is sprint planning. The purpose of sprint planning is the events
interesting.
that, right. And so more and more what I find with teams is there's the making sure that they're not the custodian, they're not the only one that can set up and run the meeting, just like we would in person. If you're not there, the meeting room should still be booked, people should still be able to show up, but also helping people to like set the context and remind them, and it's in the invites, and you say it in the meeting, and you treat everyone like it's the first one. And I just find that the everybody should know why they're there, but everybody else is who's off doing the work is struggling more with the context switch and the loss of
Yeah.
the in-person things that help them get that part done. And so the more that we can support them as a team, I just and you asked about upskilling, right? So that's all stuff that we were doing before, but it's like, do it better and be more diligent about it. And then the upskilling gets to be, well, how do you do whiteboards? Is it mural? Is it Miro? Is it
Mm-hmm.
Jamboard?
Mm-hmm.
Don't pick 100 tools, but and if you're going to use a tool, you have to educate people on how to use it. You can't just expect them to figure it out, and now you're asking them to learn more tools. So there's don't take on it's like, don't take on 100 new skills, but you probably have to take on a couple. But there's so much of this that is always resetting the context, always bringing people along, so that that time that they are together is actually efficient, and you do get out of it what you originally expected.
I love what you said about setting the context, because I have a feeling that when people, they're on their 10th or 11th sprint, they kind of start to fall into like going through the motions. Hi, Daniel. Okay, this is what I did yesterday. This is what I'm doing today. But the whole point is like, how are you advancing your sprint goal, right? So you could say it 5 different ways, right? But if people are forgetting how it connects to the overarching purpose, then I think it's good, like, to just, hey, maybe everyone knows this, but this is just a nice reminder. Okay, so that makes me wonder. Okay, so you got through keeping up with the times and what's changed with the pandemic and all. But then this is the segue, I think, that it comes to, and that is, if people are starting to get used to things, if you have to remind them this is the purpose. And for coaches, if we have to remind ourselves why we're doing something, I can't help but wonder if we've all gotten to this state with Agile. Here we are, 20 plus years after the Agile manifesto for software development. Are we all sort of experiencing some sort of Agile fatigue? Like, have we all just gotten so used to this, like we're just over it? Like, it's not the shiny object, Agile is not the shiny object it used to be. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, I just want to like take a deep breath and marinate in that question for an hour. Yes, I think that going tying back into where we were just a minute ago, definitely, yes, there's fatigue, and I feel like a lot of places are so many. So there's a lot of different ways we can go with this. I feel like in general, a lot of my clients are experiencing some form of it, even if they're still on board. And so that could look like one of the clients I'm working with now, this is their 2.0 Agile transformation. And the first one started in 2014. And you would walk in and observe them before I got there, and you would say, okay, this is a company that is doing a lot of things in an Agile way, and all of their delivery teams are set up as Scrum teams, and they're still doing annual planning, budgeting. There's still some things that kind of go against the grain, but for the most part, it is observably Agile. They have a certain bit of fatigue about like, well, why are we doing this again? And I just went through this training 10 years ago, and we just figured out our own version of calculus and how we do this, and how do we do it over here. So but there's also some companies who I feel like they bought Agile, they bought the Agile because it was, oh, we can do more with less, we can go faster, better with half as many people. They kind of bought the sizzle and not the steak. And some of them, they're all over the place, right? Some of them I think are still going through the motions, or they're calling it agile, but they're doing project planning because they told their shareholders, or they told their board of directors 5 years ago that they were going agile. So different companies in different places as far as where they are in adoption, although I would say in general what I see in the wild looks more like agile than project management. I think the people are definitely in some ways fatigued, and we definitely want to remind them why we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes why is not enough anymore. And yeah, going back to so all the way back around to your question about like, what if we treated fitness this way? This is like our New Year's resolutions from 2015 are still haunting us. And, that exasperated, I've counted all the calories and I still want to order the French fries, and I don't want to deal with the byproduct of it. And so and I'm not, I really appreciate the question, because I'm not sitting here trying, I can't blame one entity. I think it's very easy for us as coaches. So just a real quick vignette, and I was having this conversation with another coach I do a lot of work with yesterday. A client that I was at for 2 years, and I feel like we did a transformation in a business unit with almost 2,000 people, and we trained all those teams, and we all the way to like, let's map the value stream, and let's realign the teams, and let's train everybody. From what I understand, I have not been in there a while, you would still walk in and largely observe that and say, okay, this still looks like a set of Scrum teams and a set of Kanban teams at some sort of scale. It still kind of looks like Agile. Almost to the person, everybody that I worked with in there and trained them and coached them over years to get to the place where they were and felt like they were really, really happy with, like, they bought the Agile, they loved they were on the diet and the exercise, and they were feeling it, and they were living the lifestyle.
They're getting the benefits.
Another management consulting firm came in and said, the future of work is just start offering people voluntary separation packages. And this was even right before the pandemic. And almost to a person, everybody that I worked with, and I could probably name off 50 without a lot of thought, but we worked with over a couple thousand people, are gone. Like they all left. A lot of them are Agile coaches and consultants now. They've gone off and done. So there's another piece. I'm not all the way back around to say, I don't know that any one company is to blame. I don't know that any one mindset's to blame. I don't think it's like the companies are wrong or the people are wrong. But what I find as a coach so often is my labors of love, where I've invested a large part of my life helping people in an organization get to a place. When I look back not very far into, we're talking 2 years in the past, they're all gone.
Wow.
And so most of what was Agile is still there, but those people have gone on to something else. And so as a business, you've got to ask yourself, am I just upskilling and training people to move on, or do I need to pay them more, or how do I do a retention before I do an there's a lot of ways to go here. And this is why I love this question, just because we could go into one facet of it and we could probably spend an hour. I think the value is still there. Like, there is steak underneath the sizzle, and I've seen it work in so many places. And if it didn't work, these people would not be off successfully implement. They wouldn't do it at a company and then leave and successfully implement.
Right. They've obviously been changed by this experience.
Yeah, but we are mixing all the metaphors today, and I do that. I apologize, but we're haunted by the New Year's resolutions of 2015 still, and we still think we're on our Atkins diet, and we're still the athlete we were those years ago. And it's like, well, we changed some of our habits, and we are not as unhealthy as we were then, but we probably didn't hit the goal we set back then, and we're still hanging on to that, is kind of how I feel, whether you're a large organization, a small private company, a government entity, or an employee at any of those places.
Okay, well, now then, picking up on the diet metaphor, we tend to, at least in the West, we tend to like boomerang diet, right? So whatever, Atkins didn't work for me, I need to do paleo, right? Well, that's after we sit on the couch and eat our ice cream and watch the soap operas. Then it's like, oh my gosh, I got to get back to diet. But I'm not going to go back to the same diet, right? That old diet didn't work, even though it probably did when you were following it. So I've got to do a new diet. So is Agile just the shiny object type thing. Like it was a really cool, it was the diet fad of, let's say, 2000 to 2015 or 17, pick a year. But now we have a new shiny object. So I think elephant in the room, at least for me, is this huge technology disruption that we're seeing. Everyone's infatuated with AI, and with good reason, right? It's definitely a huge change, and it's disrupting industry. But is it to the point that we can only handle one disruption, right? We this is the thing that's got our attention, and all this other discipline that we've been learning and practicing and getting benefits from the last 10 years is just out the window because we can't handle more than one focus. Like we can't improve our ability to learn generative AI or capitalize on AI and what it can do for us to multiply our performance, our output. And so we can't do that at the same time we do it in agile fashion. So we got to like put agile aside for a few years and just focus on this, and maybe come back to agile, or maybe not. Maybe now our focus is so far removed we can't even keep up with it. So now we just go back to some other kind of way of working, that's some hybrid model. So I'm just curious, is it the fact that it's no longer the shiny object, that it's we're seeing this kind of agile fatigue? Like, is it like the perfect storm?
Such a really, really profound question. My opinion, so from what I've observed in longer than I'd like to admit in working in technology and business, more than a couple decades, shiny object syndrome and focus can be a challenge at any time. So I think you're for sure onto something there. If I think about it in the sense of like the fad diet metaphor, I think like any weight loss program, fitness program, where we're going from like couch to marathon, or anything that's aspirational like that, we're almost from birth in Western culture trained to like aim for the stars and or shoot for the stars and you might hit the moon kind of thing. Like we sort of over promise, under deliver. We tend to our aspirations tend to be a little beyond reality. And so I think with like what we expected out of agile transformations at the beginning of all of this hype, when all of the consulting firms were selling it, very few of those, if any, delivered on all of the promises. It was very aspirational. To go back to the diet metaphor, so it's like I am not going to lose 50 pounds and put on 30. I'm not going to trade 50 pounds of fat for 30 pounds of muscle in 90 days, no matter what I do. I think we had a lot of those, and I think that if we were going to get anything out of the best agile transformations I've been part of, and ones that I've observed, that I was not part of, you have to get the leadership involved. And there's so much of that that's about aligning priorities and being able to say no, and making sure that their strategy and tactics get aligned, whatever method of execution you're doing, but that you don't have a leadership team out making promises to customers and stakeholders and the board of directors, and the teams are going in a completely different direction. The more you have that alignment, the better. And the ones that I've been part of that were most successful did that. They made sure the leadership was involved, and they really worked on alignment. And it's never 100%, but they really focused on that. I wish that goes back to, if I take the diet metaphor, that's a little bit more of, maybe I still have the French fries occasionally, but I'm better about counting my macros, counting my calories, cutting out the things that are, in my case, whatever is in my case, worst for me. And if what we got out of agile transformations, even after the fatigue, was okay, occasionally, maybe we have a few more cheat days than we did on the diet, but we're not eating fast food 3 meals a day, or we've completely cut out saturated fat, whatever your thing is. And I feel like the ones that got more alignment between the leadership and the teams, and over time that became part of their culture, and the teams were not, you did not have two pieces of the organization working at odds at each other, that even if they have agile fatigue, even if they've sort of like, all right, we've given up on Scrum and we do something that's a little bit more like a lean delivery, or maybe not traditional project management, that they at least got the benefit of that fad diet when they were on it, and then they're on to the next thing. And a lot didn't. So, and it's I don't know. Again, I there's just so much here, and I think a lot of people are very tired for completely different reasons, but we there's very few people that can't benefit from, if I use the diet metaphor again, like just record what you did for a week and take a look at it and figure out where you made good choices, where you made bad choices, why you made the less good choices,
Right.
and do you want to do anything different next week? Right.
Like
and
that.
that's very different than like, you left keto and now you have to get back on the keto train. And there are some organizations that did that. So even if they are a little fatigued about the process or the process consulting or the names or counting story points, they at least have embodied like, as a coach, like those are the things that I think are most important. Like we could talk about estimation all day, but what I really want to see as a team is, are we thinking before we start working on everything we have to do to deliver this? And have we taken into account what we think are the levels of effort on all those pieces? Because in a company bigger than 5, who can get anything from concept into production? At some point there's separation of duties. And so if you're at least thinking about whatever I make, however I get that in the hands of the customer, if I've at least thought about what I'm going to do and at least like the level of effort and the steps, if you're having those conversations, we don't have to get into like, that's usually what these it gets to the why thing, right? Like a lot of these practices that we have, they work, and I've seen them work, but ultimately the benefit of them is it's the underlying human behavior that they create by going through the practices. And so even if you have agile fatigue and you did that, you are probably better off than you were before. And if you didn't get that alignment, that benefit before you got agile fatigue, you may have completely walked away from it. But you're right, so many companies now are on to digital transformation and generative AI and other things, and they just can't seem to hold two shiny objects in their attention span at the same time.
Okay, so really good segue. You talked about digital transformation. Years ago, I started hearing this come up a lot, and it sounded like basically they were starting to couch agile, like an agile engagement, under the umbrella of digital transformation. It's like, okay, you guys have a digital transformation you want to undertake, but to deliver on that transformation, you need agile. So it's kind of like, okay, you could kind of make that pitch, right? Does that still work today? Or they're like, hey, we just need to transform and don't tell us about the agile part? Or do you think it's still part and parcel with digital transformation?
What a great question. I've definitely seen the phenomenon you're talking, like the agile is now in the shrink wrap packaging with something else.
By the agile.
It is not the GI Joe, it's the accessory that goes with the GI Joe. Or whatever, pick your toy.
It's like the Amazon shopping cart, frequently bought together, right? You'd see your item, then the one that is right next to it.
On occasion, I think the agile transformation these days is the thing you round up so you get the free shipping. Okay. Yeah, it's I mean, I've definitely seen those things bundled together. So here's what some clients hire me to do. I'll just speak from my perspective, I guess, because I don't have a survey in my pocket on this one. Some clients hire me explicitly for agile coaching, training, agile. It's like specifically agile. I have a lot of them that come to me because I have a consulting background, and to your point, a lot of this is just branding, right? Is it digital transformation where we're changing and C used to be customer experience, CX, right? It's like, are we improving the customer experience, which Agile is all about, by giving them digital tools to self-service? And by the way, we have to change the way we work behind the scenes to do that, which includes the Agile. I've definitely seen it packaged a lot of different ways in recent times. I have clients that sort of come to me both directions. Some of them come to me for explicit agile things. Some of them come to me for what would be branded as business agility, right, or general business agility consulting. And a lot of that looks like, I mean, what I see more often, especially when you I've worked at a lot of scales, but my sweet spot really seems to be what I would say is like companies that are in like the 100 million to 500 million in revenue, and they want to get to $1 billion. So it's like whatever the we're a successful business at a certain scale, and we want to get to whatever we think is the next multiple or IPO or whatever it is. And I end up in there because it's, well, what I would categorize, and I would say this to them too, is like sloppy delivery. And so that really could be problems with the customer experience, problems with how the product or service is presented, or how we do product or service management. And so all of that said, a lot of them, it's kind of what it used to be before Agile, where it's like, this is my problem. And my problem is X. I can only deliver 50% of the promised features, or we have we bought a company and now we have two products that compete with each other. We don't know how to resolve. And there's a and so, and when I get into the business problem solving, eventually we get down to the process level and the delivery, and it looks like, all right, it's either whether you're in the CMM world where it's CMM level 1 heroics, like it's just people brute forcing things to get done, or we have some made up process of how we get done, or we have something that looks like eventually you get under the covers, and it goes back to my thing a few minutes ago, which is if you're in a company bigger than about 5 people, you are not conceiving of the thing and building the thing and delivering the thing and doing the customer service on the thing. And so how do we look at that holistically as one thing and say we want to make our customers happy, and we have to turn $1 into $5 or we're not going to be here? And what are all the inputs and steps, and what's the best way to do that? And so that, I don't have a certification in Agile that allows me to sell certifications, meaning I can train you on any Agile methodology, but I'm not out here to sell any flavor of Agile just because, I can't mince you as a particular thing. I could train you as a role in Scrum, but I can't certify you as a role in Scrum. So, but I always go to those set of practices because I feel like they're easiest to understand, they're easiest to implement. You can get a lot of value very quickly. People are always clunky of them, as you said earlier, in the first 3 to 11 sprints. But eventually they're like, once they've got the mechanics down and it's second nature, then you really get into the why we're doing it this way and how is it different than we did before. So I think that there's, I don't know if this is exactly your question, but there is still a place for it, and it still shows up. I think it seems like if you're not a boutique Agile consulting firm, the big consulting firms that kind of sell all of the sizzle and all the steaks, are packaging it in the shrink wrap with something else. That's what I've been seeing more in the last 3 to 5 years. It's part of as we said, it's part of the digital transformation. It's part of the future of work. It's part of the other thing. And I know for myself personally, when companies bring me in and they're like, we don't need to talk about Scrum or Kanban or anything. We just need to talk about why are our expenses, why is our support cost so high, or some other business agility lever. Then when we get into it, we eventually get down to how the teams work and how the flow of communication happens. And that's where it's like, this could really be like, this could be a Kanban board, and this could be people coming together twice a week for 15 minutes.
So it comes back to teams and delivery, right? So even though it starts as this much higher level kind of enterprise discussion, it kind of comes back to, but teams still have to deliver.
Teams always have to deliver. I mean, again, unless sometimes I dream about these people that they have a great app idea and they're everything. Like they write the app and they do the customer support, and just to be a one person, truly my customers are the only people that I have to fire. Like I don't have a boss and I get to decide what I want to make in my product. But that's, those really, there's just almost none of those, right? Everything is a company and a product and service. And if, right. Or a nonprofit or a government entity, but you're providing a product or service. And if you take it from the perspective of who's consuming it and what they need, then there's teams all the way down, all the way up and down, right? From who builds it to who supports it to who hires the people that build and support it, and who helps write the contracts. And so there's a place for those practices just about everywhere, whether it's just a set of lean principles or it's it does, like, not everything has to look like one thing, but there's just so much, there is a lot of richness in that mindset and all of those set of practices and in that value system. And you can draw a line all the way back to Deming and the 14 points, and I just think that there's a lot of wisdom out there that anchors back to a lot of application and practice and what works, and leaning out what didn't work. And
Mm.
so yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff there, but I think that how a lot, I don't want to say a lot, but at least half of my clients now, they're not coming to me and saying like, I need you because you're an agile coach. They're coming to me because they have a specific business problem, and within 6 weeks we're talking, if not 2 days later, we are talking about how the people are working together and
Yeah.
collaborating and doing the delivery. And there's something there that is either, something that could benefit from Agile or could benefit from some of those practices or some of those values or principles.
It's a really beautiful segue, because what you talked about, I think you mentioned the way they're working. It seems to me the language is changing a bit, like in ops groups, operations, sometimes PMO. There's a lot of talking about a way of working, which I think dovetails really well with Agile, right? Because to me, it comes down to just a completely different way of working, right? There's no more silos, no more throwing it over the wall, no more, okay, I succeed, even if you don't succeed, I win, you lose. But, it's we win or we failed and we got to improve, right? So I feel like the way of working could be maybe a clue to how we can just sort of set aside do we have to sell Agile, or can we even talk about Agile anymore, and just say, just talk about a way of working, right? Because everyone needs it. I think people would agree, like, we have to work smarter, not harder, that kind of thing. So I'm wondering if there just isn't a teams and way of working play here that eventually becomes obvious, right? So like you said, even if it started with digital transformation, pretty soon you're talking about the teams and how are they working together? What's the obstacles for delivery? If it's just going to come to way of working, and then, hey, there's a name for this. It's already been well defined at this point. We can leverage it and, take advantage of what the whole industry's already learned.
I love it. Yeah, I think who's doing the work and how they're working together is, if not a great entry point, if you're doing this kind of consulting work, organizational coaching, business agility coaching, working with product teams, you get there pretty quickly. And for me, it's not about, with any of this stuff, it's not about blame. There's plenty of companies that you could objectively say there's something is wrong, like something is configured wrong or done wrong or doesn't felt like, if it were bad or wrong, they'd be out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to, I just feel like, as long as we approach it from a perspective of releasing judgment and just kind of honoring, like, this is the system as it presents itself, or this is what's here and it's working. If I haven't abused enough metaphors yet today, what I very often will go to is companies are organic, they grow like a weed, and everybody wants a topiary where it's the seal that's got a ball on its nose kind of thing, and you don't flip a switch and get to that, right? And we just have to, like, if what we have is a very tall shrub or a very wide shrub or something that's got a hole in the middle, like, we have something to work with. And we don't want to just go in and say, I'll speak for myself, I don't want to go in and just objectively say this is bad, this is wrong. What you should be doing is what the textbook says, as much as, what are your goals that you're not achieving, or where do you want to be, and what do we have to work with, and what are the small incremental steps we can take to get there. And of course, as we all know, if you want to do a big bang transformation, there's a benefit there. But if that's not, I go back to the ICF coaching world, like, we have to meet our clients where they're at.
Yeah.
And if that's not where they are, how do we reveal to them there's a better way to work? And so, back to your point, that could be one team at a time. That might not be, it could be, I have 50 IT teams that are all off doing whatever they're doing, but I have one ops team that's doing support for that. And if I can help them and I can get them working efficiently, I just want to double click on the other thing you said, which is a dynamic that I'm always looking for and trying to shift, which is, like us versus them is very human nature. Them should not be inside our four walls.
Mm.
So if we have a dynamic where we've got departments or teams that are at odds with each other, like let your competitors be them, let your worst, hopefully not, but let your worst customers be them. But yeah, we're not going to make a whole lot of progress in those kind of entrenched battles where it's my team versus your team. And so I think ultimately the work teams, back to your point, like I think that's always a way in. And if I can just, in my example, work with like one ops team and help them to be more efficient and streamline things and have clear communication, they're being leaders, big L leaders, right? They are modeling a behavior for the rest of the organization that, and going back to like modeling that behavior doesn't mean you have to adopt their practices. But what you can see from them is like the outcome of this is they are more transparent and they are more open and they are more concise and they understand clearly what the customer needs and they can do that transparently and they're good at prioritization. I want those things, right? Or those, what don't I have in my team? I don't have transparency. We don't do well with prioritization. Well, that you can adopt the big A Agile umbrella and not necessarily that set of practices, and you can start to get at some of those things. So yeah, it's funny how this, if I go back to when I started in 2008, all these Agile, specifically Scrum, but Scrum and Kanban adoptions really were bottom up. It was like
Yep.
ops teams and development teams. And then we had this shift somewhere in the 2010, 12, maybe 15, I would think of as the pinnacle of all the consulting firms with their own subway maps, being more top down. And in this world of Agile fatigue, I do think there's definitely a huge opening for just to go back to bottom up. Like we know this works and we know what works. And by the way, if you said, I'm going to build 750 houses, I'm not going to come in and tell you should do that as a Scrum team. I might recommend a more linear project management approach. It's not about adopting the wrong, like pick the thing that's appropriate for your situation. Don't pick the wrong tool for the right situation. But we know it works and we know where it works. And there's just a huge opportunity for more ground up adoption.
Right on. I think that's a good place to leave it. I think we've covered some good ground here, talked about, the Agile fatigue, but we gave some, I think, quite a glimmer of hope for how we move forward, maybe adopt some new language. Anything else you want to mention in closing here, John?
No, again, I just as you could tell, like I just appreciate this conversation because a lot of excitement around the topic, and I think there's a lot of places we can go. But I agree with you. I think this there is a lot of hope and a lot of possibility. It's just probably not going to look like it has the last few years. And who knows if we get to do this again, maybe we can talk about scaling or how that gets even bigger. But
there's a teaser for you in the
part.
audience. There could be a future interview coming up on scaling. I do want to mention, you're very tightly involved with the Agile Coaching Exchange. I want to throw that out there. I'll put a link in the notes for the video. Is there anything else you want to give a shout out to?
No, I really appreciate that. Yeah, just to say that so we started the Agile Coaching Exchange meetup back in 2015 here in North America. We borrowed the concept from London with their support. And we have we used to have city-based ACE chapters and we would meet in person. And then in April of 2020, we switched to virtual. We had only really had one virtual meeting before that. And we've met monthly virtually ever since. And then really, I think last year we made the decision that instead of having city-based chapters, we have a set of organizers on the East Coast and the West Coast. So you'll have the link to share in the notes, agilecoachingexchange.com. But we have chapters in both. It doesn't matter where you live, you can join both, but the East Coast ones tend to schedule around East Coast time and us for West Coast time. But yeah, we still continue to meet monthly and we try to bring topics that we think help develop and chat, help us as coaches think about what we're not thinking about and just sort of look at our own self-development and get some pointers and some resources. So I appreciate you bringing that up a couple times. Yeah, I just don't think you get good at this without some self-reflection and a lot of support from other people. We all have blind spots. So
exactly.
Please, hopefully people find that useful and check us out.
Awesome. Well, that will do it for today. Thank you, John, for your time. And audience, this has been Agile Outcomes. I'm your host, Daniel Spencer. Looking forward to next time we meet.